Good afternoon, sports fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Big D podcast. Before I announce today's special guest, please subscribe, like, share, comment to the Spunky Spectrum Sports YouTube page where you never know what to expect. It might be draft coverage, it might be hurricane, or it might be a cat, or it might be a cat roaming across the. Is that roaming across the screen? So. Joining us from what is it, Danville, Illinois, is
Yes, sir.
part-time weatherman, part-time sports guru, part-time radio guy, just a little bit of everything. Dennis.
Yes, it's quite an adventure. I do some freelance work in motorsports. I do play-by-play in sports as eclectic as ultimate frisbee. And I also write for Fake Pigskin, but my paying job is the ag host for all our farm coverage over at WITY Radio. We're kind of like the big ag station in this part of the world, but my background was in agricultural meteorology. I always wanted to do radio, and now here I am. Finally, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, but now I'm doing it all.
Yeah, and I bet you see all kinds of crazy weather conditions. The only thing you don't see in Illinois is a hurricane.
Yeah, that's about the only one we don't get. But when I used to work for United Airlines as a weather forecaster, I had to deal with hurricanes and typhoons on a weekly basis in the summer. So what it taught me is that dealing with tornadoes was a lot better.
So obviously last night the NFL draft took place. So what were your main storylines heading into the draft, and were there any surprises?
Well, I look at the NFL draft a little bit different than a lot of people do. A lot of people say, oh, there were so many surprises in the first round. And I look at each team and I say, okay, if I was in charge, which the NFL team that put me in charge would be on their way to having the first round draft pick the following year. But I look at it from that standpoint of I analyze the talent that's on that team, but I also analyze the draft because impact players on the offensive side of the ball, if you look at the numbers over the past 6 years, in the last 6 drafts, the numbers say if you want an impact player at wide receiver, running back, or especially quarterback, you got to draft them in the first 2 rounds. If you look at any team's offensive line, especially the good ones, you will see a lot of offensive linemen. Look at the Kansas City Chiefs, my Kansas City Chiefs. I'm a Chiefs fan. You look at the rebuilt offensive line that everybody is raving about, and the only one that was drafted in the first round was Kyle Long, and he is scheduled to be kind of an all-around backup on the line. Everybody else was drafted, most of them 3rd round and later. So you can get good offensive linemen, good defensive linemen, good cornerbacks in the 3rd through 5th round. If you want an impact offensive player, you got to get them early. So every time I see people saying, well, I got a great wide receiver for Joe Burrow, but who's going to protect him? Wait until the draft is over before you give a grade for how Cincinnati did. So when I look at this draft, there is only one pick in the entire draft that when it was made, I said, why are they doing this? And it just coincidentally happened to be the Giants, who have been doing some weird things in the draft anyway, because I don't look at Toney as one of those kind of wide receivers that's going to be a difference maker, except as a kick returner. If Giants were really set at every position, if they had a good depth at every position, they were really set for a good playoff run, you knew they were going to win 10 to 12 games and they're going to go to the playoffs, draft a kick returner because he'll be one of the best. This is like Devin Hester revisited. But if you are looking to build a team with difference makers, I'm not so sure he's the pick. But everybody else I'm looking at, I'm going, well, that makes sense with what they're trying to do. and I'll withhold judgment of how good or bad they did until we get to about the fifth round. By the fifth round, it's like the 22nd round in a dynasty draft from round 6 and 7. You're like, let me get this dart. Yeah, maybe. But before the fifth round, you better be drafting starters.
Yeah, to me, I didn't think Toney was a reach at 20, but the team that drafted him surprised me because you look at the Giants, they've got a lot of good weapons on offense. I mean, of course, Saquon Barkley coming off the 20 ACL. They added Kenny Galladay, Darius Slayton, Shepard, of course, Evan Ingram, and Kyle Rudolph as tight ends. Giants didn't need a wide receiver. If anything, the Giants could have done with a pass rush.
Yeah, and if they wanted to go quick wide receiver, why not go Elijah Moore? The only difference between Elijah Moore and Toney is that Elijah Moore probably won't be returning kicks for his team unless they're really desperate. Toney's a great kick returner. He's going to they could use him on both punt and kick returns if they want. He's got good hands. He's good at taking care of the ball. But what I saw is that saw a guy who's got good skills but not great skills at wide receiver. Can you train him into a great wide receiver? Maybe, but he doesn't seem to play very physical. And in the NFL, you're going to be pressing guys like that, and you're going to be putting a body on them. And unless you can move him around, I don't know. But looking at that need, was that a big need for the Giants? Could they have traded down and still gotten him? That's my point. Is I think they could have traded down even further and gotten more picks for the future or for in the second, third round and continued to move back, because I don't think he was going to any of the teams that were like the next 5 to draft. They weren't going to grab him. And that's when I look at a draft pick and I say, it doesn't make sense because the people behind you were not going to take him.
Yeah, sometimes you reach for a player because you think he won't be there later in the draft. I mean, be honest, the one pick that confused me was Vegas taking taking the Alabama tackle Leatherwood at 17 because he's not a first round pick.
Yeah, he's a big body though. And do you project him as being something that they needed? I don't know. I'll be honest with you. When it comes to offensive linemen, I'm like, I don't know what to look for on film. So I'm not so sure that was a horrible pick, but I'm with you there. It's like, do they have other needs that could be addressed? That's the big question there. But I don't know. I would have wanted maybe a defensive playmaker there instead of him. You're right. He was kind of grading out from everything that I read, and I'm going more by what I read on offensive linemen than what I think. One of the things I think we do, Dylan, is we look at the game of football from a fantasy perspective too often. And look what happened with all the James Robinson, big James Robinson supporters, people that had probably drafted him in early redraft leagues or best ball already in the top 12. And now he's, a backup basically, or at least I think he will be. We mix up good fantasy numbers with good real football numbers. If you look at a player like James Robinson, he's solid but not spectacular. You want spectacular at your running back and wide receiver positions. And, that's where the difference makers are and where they come. And I think sometimes in fantasy football, we forget that their job is not to post great stats. It's to win football games.
Yeah, and in a way, today's NFL is more about catching the ball than running the ball. I mean, look how many people wanted to get Clyde Edwards-Helaire early in last year's drafts because he was the running back in the Andy Reid's offense.
Yeah, and that was another case, and I said this at the time last year, and people can look it up if they don't believe me. I'm a big Chiefs fan. I love that pick for real football reasons. CEH is a good real football addition to that Chiefs team, and he was what they needed which was a more all-purpose back than what Damian Williams was to them. He isn't a big enough body to be really good in the red zone. That's the only down play I have for CEH. But if you look at the way Andy Reid uses running backs, and has, with the exception of the year that he had to play a rookie because he didn't have anybody else, and lo and behold, the rookie ended up being a pretty good rookie. If you look at that, you look at his history, though, he's always had a timeshare in the backfield. And when you have a timeshare in the backfield, even a player that's a good fantasy or good real football player, and if you look at the Chiefs, they have a lot of really good football players at wide receiver. I'll make a case that Demarcus Robinson is perfect for that team, but he was never going to be on a roster of mine in fantasy football. Sammy Watkins was another great real football player when he was healthy, just a marginal fantasy football player, maybe a flex on a good week when he was healthy. But if you look at the way a team attacks, that determines how valuable a good football player is to your fantasy team. And I sometimes think we get them too mixed up.
So, which team do you think aced its draft last night, and which team has got more work to do?
Oh, this is not even a question of who aced the draft. The Chicago Bears, up until the point that I saw this pick on at least 4 sites last night, I was in disbelief that they would pick the better quarterback, because they've got this history of thinking that a guy like Trubisky is going to be the guy. So I thought, oh, they want a guy who's only got like 17 games in his career. They're going for Mac Jones. This is a Mac Jones play all the way. And, you know, when I saw the first little thing come in on my phone before ESPN announced it, I'm like, yeah, right, somebody's playing games with me. Then I saw it on another website, and I'm like, oh, I still don't believe it. ESPN announced it, and had the guy, you know, from Chicago, from that great charity, announcing it, and I still was in disbelief until I saw it again. I mean, this is how much I've become used to the Bears screwing things up. I'm of the belief that if you tell the Bears, you say pick a number between 1 and 3, they'll say 5. You know, they'll find a way to mess things up. But they're the winners, because going into the draft, I don't think they thought at all that they had a chance at Justin Fields. I'm pretty much convinced that that's why they signed Dalton. They wanted an insurance policy. And if nothing else, signing Dalton is genius. And people are going to say, oh my God, the guy's been sniffing glue or something. It was genius because nobody drafting ahead of the Bears or ahead of any of those spots that were going to go thought the Bears were even in the running for a quarterback. So as soon as Denver passed on that pick, the Bears were in a great spot to pounce, and they did. They didn't give up too much, in my opinion. I think they gave up less. If you look at the draft picks and the way it went, I think they gave up less to get Justin Fields than they did Trubisky. And my reasoning is that Justin Fields has so much more upside than Trubisky. I was not a Trubisky fan when he got drafted. Faded him in every fantasy league until Nagy came. I sipped the Kool-Aid and thought Nagy was going to turn this kid around. He did at times. He had some good games, but he had too much inconsistency. If Fields can be a more consistent quarterback for the Bears, remember, they're going to still be heavy run, even with Nagy running that team. They're going to be conservative because they want to help their defense out a little bit, because they don't have the super duper typical Bears defense. You're going to see them want to run to wind games down, which is what Andy Reid does with Kansas City when he gets the lead. But Fields has that opportunity to put up some pretty good numbers, and if he starts from game 1, I wouldn't be surprised if he sets the all-time single-season record for most passing yards in Chicago Bear history. Of course, that bar has been set pretty low. It's 3,800 and change. So he doesn't have a lot to do there.
Well, he's cheating. He's got a 17-game season.
Yeah, that he's got going for him too. If he can stay healthy, it's going to be interesting to see how the rookies go and see if coaches just rest guys, against weaker opponents this year. Although I think the Bears are not going to have many matchups where you're going to say it's weaker opponents.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think who be interesting to see what Fields does this year. So now we switch from NFL to another sport we like, NASCAR, and this weekend at Kansas is shaking up as another crazy one. I mean, I'm not sure what could be crazier than Talladega last week, but I think Kansas is going to be crazy. I mean, is there a crazier place for restarts in Kansas?
Yeah, it's a pretty nutty place, and Kansas Speedway is near and dear to my heart because I almost got killed there years ago. The very first NASCAR race, I had credentials as media for photography, and I was down in turn 4, coming off of turn 4 to get some great pictures during practice. And I'm looking, I'd missed the first practice because I was late getting out to the track. And I'm looking at all the skid marks on the track, and I'm like, yeah, I'm right in the right place. There's skid marks right towards the wall here. So I was no novice around the track, so I was pretty good at knowing how my escape paths were and everything. In case a car's coming, I'm not going to stay and be a hero and get the shot. I'm going to run like a coward. And, having studied physics, I kind of understand which way to run. That's the most value I ever got out of physics class, by the way. But anyway, I saw Skinner start spinning in practice off of turn 4, and I'm snapping shots until he hits the grass. And then I go to run. Some numbskull photographer put his big old camera bag right behind me without me noticing. I trip on it, and I'm now laying there out there in no man's land, and I rolled against the wall only to feel and hear Skinner's car hit the wall and debris flying over. Luckily, it was about 20 feet up the track, and he didn't go through the wall, but it was close enough that I learned that I always look behind me now whenever I'm at the track as a photographer. But it's hard to believe that track has been there for 20 years. It is a fabulous place to go watch a race. The track itself ain't all that great as far as it's gotten better with time as it's aged, but it's all going to be about the restarts. It's all going to be about track position. Clean air is all that's going to matter at Kansas Speedway this weekend. So it doesn't matter if you got older tires, doesn't matter anything else. If you get out to that lead, air on the nose is going to be worth like a 1.5 second lead within a couple of laps.
I mean, I think back to last year's race, and even though Joey Logano's car was not the best, he did a magnificent job blocking Kevin Harvick.
Yeah, and it's good to have a young guy like you on here because I'm so old I don't even remember where I put my car keys when I got home from work today, let alone details of last year's race, unless I look it up and all of a sudden I look and I go, oh yeah, that's right. But the cool thing that we've got going on right now in NASCAR, Dylan, there's 2 really cool things in my opinion. One is we're seeing some crazy different guys winning races. To have 9 different winners right now out of 10 races is fabulous, especially when 3 guys that won the most races last year have yet to win a race all year. And the other cool thing that we've got going on, and I have to confess, I've always been a Clint Bowyer fan. Media, you're not supposed to be a fan. Years ago, when he was, we're getting ready for Chase Media Day. Remember back a few years when he did that little shenanigans out at Richmond to get the car into the playoffs? The team played a little game with how they did things, and everybody was upset. And then they added Jeff Gordon in as a 13th driver in the chase just to kind of even it out. Well, Clint Bowyer was taking no questions that weekend about that incident. But I knew his PR guy. Had talked to him many, many times. So I conned his PR guy into letting me ask a question. about cheating. But the question wasn't about Richmond. It was about the limo race that he did on the Duck Dynasty show. So if you can imagine this, I'm building it up and talking about it. Hey, Clint, I think the world of you as a driver, but everybody knows you're cheating. And he's looking at his PR guy and he's giving him this dirty look and he's looking at me and he's ready to walk away. And I said, there's just no way that you didn't soup up that limo in that limo, race. Clint Bowyer bursts out laughing. He just cracks up. And he in the middle of the interview, he says to the PR guy, okay, you're not fired. And, I've always enjoyed Clint because he's got a great sense of humor and he is what you see on TV is the same thing you see when you interview him. And a lot of times when I'm at the track, I'm interviewing these guys or I'm grabbing them for a little comment when I'm covering a race. I don't have a preset interview. They don't have to talk to me. I'm nobody. I'm a freelancer for Front Stretch, but Clint is always giving you time to say, yeah, the car's okay this weekend or whatever. He's always got a minute to talk to you, which is unlike many drivers. They'll tell you, hey, go see my PR guy or lady, and we can arrange something maybe. And that's their way of saying, he ain't talking to you this weekend. But Clint's always available to anybody at the track. He's great with the fans, and he's even better on television. I'm watching this guy for these first few races this year, and I'm thinking, I've seen a guy like this who makes the race more fun for me, and it immediately hit me. And you're too young to remember him, maybe, but Benny Parsons.
I
Benny,
BP.
yeah, Benny back in the 80s when ESPN was sort of, looking for a sport. They found NASCAR. He was on with Bob Jenkins, and Benny did this whole routine called Benny's Buffet, where he would go around to different campsites and different teams showing all the good things to eat. And he'd be sampling them, of course. And that was Benny's Buffet. And Benny Parsons made a race fun, whether it was going to be a last lap finish that was super close, or if the guy was going to win by 10 seconds. You didn't care because you tuned in almost as much to listen to Benny tell stories and to be Benny. And I've got that same feeling with Clint Bowyer. This has been a brilliant move by Fox Sports. And usually we get to the end of the Fox Sports part of the season and I'm worn out from them never questioning a call, never questioning a move, being so vanilla fluff. And this year with Clint's saying things that can't always be pleasing to NASCAR or some of the teams, but he's just being Clint. He doesn't mean anything nasty by it. He's just telling the truth because Clint Bowyer doesn't know anything else than being fun and telling the truth.
Now, unfortunately, can Clint Bowyer become a better iRacer?
Yeah, Clint Bowyer is a racer. It's so funny because this is a guy that came out of obscurity from the dirt tracks. In the story, one of the times I interviewed him when he first came into NASCAR, and he told me the story about when he first got the call from Richard Childress to come race for him. He was convinced it was some buddy of his playing a prank on him, and he hung up on Richard Childress. Not once, but twice. The third time the phone rang, he was all upset. He was getting ready to yell at the guy, and then he realized this is Moore's, this is like Welcome, North Carolina, this call is coming from. I don't know anybody in North Carolina. And he answered it, and it was Richard Childress offering him a ride in the old Busch series part-time. And so this guy came out of obscurity. He got the most out of his career that he could. And gee, who else did that? Benny Parsons. Benny wasn't as great as Cale Yarborough. He wasn't as great as Darrell Waltrip. He wasn't as great as David Pearson that he raced again, or certainly not Petty. But Benny was a good, solid stock car racer. Clint Bowyer was like a 15th best guy in Cup. I'd like to be the 15th best guy in what I do for a living, because that's a pretty good bar to set. But we sometimes forget, not everybody can be Earnhardt or Gordon or Petty or, even Chase Elliott. Not everybody's going to win a championship. I mean, we learned that with Dale Earnhardt Jr., didn't we?
I mean, look at the guys who haven't won a championship or who didn't win the Daytona 500. I mean, I'm amazed Mark Martin never won a title because it seemed like he finished second, what, 4 or 5 times.
I was looking around my desk for either my Mark Martin bobblehead or my race cars. Mark Martin was my guy. Earnhardt was my guy until he won too much, and then I switched to Mark Martin because he just had that, that spirit coming from the short tracks, missing the first time he came to NASCAR, going back home, working his way back up, and then becoming one of the best guys. Well, let me put you this way. A couple weeks ago on Front Stretch, or a couple months ago, I wrote an article saying that Denny Hamlin has now replaced Mark Martin as the best Cup driver to have never won a championship. Hamlin and Martin are right there, 1 and 1A for that title. But, does that take away from his career? No. And Benny Parsons was a good but not great driver. He had a good season, but as a driver, if you look at his career as a total, his years as an announcer made a bigger impact on the sport than Benny Parsons, the taxi driver from Detroit City, coming to NASCAR, as Ken Squire would say.
So, what do you think? So, who do you think wins this Sunday in Kansas?
It's going to be a battle of the pit crews. And if it's the battle of the pit crews, you kind of want to have either a Penske driver or you want to have a Joe Gibbs driver. If I was saying by who is best on this track as a racer, I might take Harvick, but he always seems to find a way to either mess up the pit stop for his pit crew, or his pit crew finds a way to mess up the pit stop. But so I would take. I'm going to take Martin Truex Jr. I think he's going to have a good week.
Oh, that'd be interesting because usually Truex has done well in the high horsepower, low downforce packages, but Kansas being high downforce, low horsepower would be interesting. Truex ran well in July last year, and the conditions won't be near as hot, but it'll be more like July when they race in 100-degree heat.
Well, by Sunday, though, I'm not sure if it's going to be all that nasty out there in Kansas this weekend. I haven't looked at.
Be like 80.
Yeah, and that might be pushing it. They might cool off Sunday morning out there. I was kind of watching the weather for us here in our part of the Midwest, and we're going to be turning really much cooler early part of the week. I have to take a look at Kansas Speedway before I make my pick this weekend. But no, I'm going to stick with one of those Joe Gibbs guys, because they seem to be getting off a pit road a lot faster than everybody else.
Well, be honest, right now, there's only one guy I'm using on a 1.5-mile track this year, and it's Kyle Larson.
Yeah.
Look at what he's done on a 1.5-mile track this year.
Yeah.
Top 5 at Homestead, dominated Las Vegas and won it. Dominated Atlanta, probably should have won it, but Brian Blaney nipped him on the last run. I don't care where Lawson's starting. I don't care that he hasn't raced on this track in a couple of years. I think Kyle Larson can make it and win his second race of the year. He has been so good this year, and I think this package favors Larson. You got to be aggressive on restarts. And I know Kansas is a very difficult track to pass, but I think Kyle Larson can overcome a bad starting spot. And if you want somebody else, I look at the 24 car of William Byron. He starts up front. Look at the race he won, Homestead. And I just see something with those Hendrick guys, particularly
Yep.
on these mile-and-a-half tracks. They've got something figured out. I don't know if the aero, the horsepower, what those Hendrick cars have been fast. Byron led a good chunk of the race in
Yep.
July, so it'll be
And
an
all and also great in the pits too. Like Hendrick teams are very fast in the pits. Only reason I didn't mention Kyle Larson is because of the bad starting position. If they had real qualifying, like he'd be a top 5 starting spot every single week, and he'd be the guy to pick every single week. He's just come back with a vengeance, and he's got great equipment. He's never had great equipment. We're starting to find out that he's even more of a special driver than we thought he was. He carried that Ganassi equipment.
Yeah, I mean, and look what's happened this year. Kurt Busch and Ross Chastain all
Yeah.
nowhere in sight.
I like the watermelon boy, but he's talent-wise, he's no Kyle Larson, and we're starting to see how fast those cars really are.
Yeah, the watermelon guy's actually from my area because he's from Southwest Florida like me.
Yeah, he's a cool guy too. He's a guy that figured out a way to take the family money and to sort of parlay it into finding some sponsorship that would help him get noticed, and people love him. Another one of these cases where you've got to be good in the car, but you got to be good with the sponsors to make it in NASCAR nowadays.
Indeed. So thank you for hopping on the line, Dennis. And whether it be Hurricanes, football, NASCAR, we look forward to the next few days in Cleveland and Kansas. And it will be crazy this weekend, right?
Absolutely, in a different type of horsepower. Take Hot Rod Charlie and Street Stock as your 1-2 upset specials for the Kentucky Derby this week. If anybody beats the favorite, those would be the 2 guys coming at the end.
Yeah, Run for the Roses tomorrow at Show Downs. You have a Kentucky Derby outfit?
No, but I'll find a hat. How about that? I'll wear the cat as a hat. That'll work good.
I need a pink suit. I've got the tie. Just need a pink suit.
There you go. Well, Dylan, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Dennis.